Hello and welcome to the ManageIQ Sprint 178 review. We're back to our regular cadence now, since we did the last one last week. As usual, I'll provide the overview. Kavya will update us on the UI, Adam on the providers, and Jason on everything else. So this sprint, we had 101 pull requests opened and 83 merged. So we're back to a pace similar to 175 and 176. Probably a little bit lower since we did have the Christmas, New Year's holidays in the sprint. In terms of the spread of the pull requests, 38 were bugs, 19 enhancements, and everything else sprinkled around. And with that, I'll turn it over to Kavya.
Thanks, Oleg. This sprint total 11 PRs got merged into UI repos, 6 bugs, 4 enhancements, and 1 technical debt. Next one. Gilbert converted add and edit security group form into React. Here, yeah, next one. He also converted catalog items table in catalog space to Carbon. We are slowly converting all HTML tables to React, so this is done as part of that. Next one. He also fixed generic object form CSS. Earlier, all field arrays are displayed vertically and it is taking a lot of space and we have to scroll so much to see all of these. So he made those horizontal now to save some space. Next one. This is a bug in WebMKS. Some of the dependencies are not mentioned properly in the remote console file. So since I think it is there since Lasker. So I fixed that issue here. Jeffrey fixed a bug in data store table loading. Next one. Gilbert converted IS4 images table into React. Above basic information thing is comes under summary. Also, Jeffrey is converting that in next one. So you can see the below table, which is HTML1, is converted to React. I think that's all from you. Over to Adam.
Thanks, Kavya. So for providers in core this sprint, I simplified the refresher pre-process targets method. This is one which kind of evolved over time as graph refresh was added and it grew more and more complex. So now the graph refresh has been default for a long time. I took another look at this and was able to clean up a bunch of code and simplify what it was doing. Also turned out that it fixed a bug where the full refresh target threshold wasn't being honored, which was if you queue more than, I think the default is 100 targets, it should default to a full refresh. And this was just no longer working anymore because of how kind of complex the logic was. It was hard to follow how things are going. So got that fixed up. Also moved the snapshots inventory collection to the shared persister so that it can be used by the cloud managers. This was only defined for infrastructure managers, but we have a few cloud managers that were defining it. And so we were able to clean those up and move that over to shared. I was also adding missing inventory collections used by OpenStack. This meant that OpenStack had to define all of the properties for the collection when typically that's handled by core. So we were able to clean up some provider persister code as well there. And then this sprint, we had a lot of fixes across basically all of the providers for incorrectly built model classes during refresh. So we're working on adding an enhancement so that when the model class is auto-detected, it doesn't fall back to the base class when it shouldn't. This was being done if you didn't correctly either define the class or add require nested or a few other possible reasons why it could happen. But basically what ended up happening was during refresh, it would create records with the base class model as opposed to being namespace out of the provider. Turned out that, I was expecting it would probably find 3-4 of them, but there was like, a dozen or 18 of these problems. So it was nice to be able to get those all fixed up. Should have that enhancement probably merge next sprint to core. Next slide. For AutoSCE, we're now using targeted refresh after Cloud Volume create, update, and delete operations. So previously this was queuing a full refresh. Now that AutoSCE has targeted refresh support, using targeted refresh for those cloud volume operations, which is much more efficient. We also removed some unused scopes that were added to volume mappings. Basically, there are volume mappings to a host or volume mappings to a cluster, and there were scopes to split these up, but we've replaced that with STI because that was a better way to do it anyway. We just never deleted the scopes, so now those are gone. For OpenStack, we refactored to use the standard persister methods from core. OpenStack was one of these early providers to do multi-manager combined targeted refresh. And so they had to implement their own logic for setting the parent properly. This has since been added to core. And so we moved OpenStack over to use those, and we're able to delete a good amount of code from the OpenStack provider plugin. And for VMware, we allowed the collection of disconnected hosts. Previously, these are being skipped because they were missing the config property. But now we're able to report on the host being disconnected as opposed to just looking like they don't exist. And that's it for me. Over to Jason.
Okay.
Oh, that's right. Forgot about it. One new provider this sprint. We added the IBM Cloud Infrastructure Center, which is based on OpenStack and OpenStack compatible API. Runs on the Z architecture. And so that's the link to the product documentation and to the managed IQ provider repo. Now that's it for me.
All right, thanks, Adam. On the platform side, Adam fixed an issue in Automate where the VM rename operation that was added in the last sprint wasn't exposed via Automate. So that's now available via Automate. And I added a change during the build to add the ability to inspect the ISO for Kickstart logging. So we, last sprint, Brandon added a change to modify the ISO that we use during the build so that it won't log in case there's any sort of sensitive things in the output from those logs. I changed that to always check to see if that modification has been in place. So if we ever change the ISO in the future, it'll just automatically check for it and modify the ISO if it detects that it hasn't been modified. Excuse me. We had a lot of documentation changes this sprint. Adam added examples of VM reconfigure with NICs and CD-ROMs to the API documentation. I removed an incorrect note about disabled providers when we use the note was talking about enabling and disabling regions, but it was actually describing how to enable and disable providers, but that's not how it works. So it was just completely wrong. So we just removed the note entirely. Adam removed the last few references to the middleware providers. Middleware providers were removed a long time ago, but the documentation was still around in bits and pieces. And finally, Jay fixed an issue with the IBM COS image paths that happened after we reorganized some of the documentation, and a bunch of the images links were broken. So that fixed those up. Next slide, please. On the API side, Gilbert added an options call for security groups. So if you hit API security groups with an options verb, you can get back the DDF forms and the other goodies. Next slide, please. And on the developer side, continuing down the path of switching to GitHub Actions. So Keenan and myself worked on Active Record virtual attributes to get that over to GitHub Actions. And I've also updated PG logical replication to GitHub Actions. Unfortunately, it's broken at the moment because of the weird way it needs to deal with the Postgres service. So while that one is switched, it's not actually completed. Gregory added a button guide to the guides for provider developers that want to add their own buttons. So this explains how to do it in a pluggable provider. And finally, Adam added a blog post about our maintenance of the RBVM-OMI gem. VMware has stopped supporting the RBVM-OMI gem. And so we've taken up maintenance on it and released it as RBVM-OMI 2, including support for newer versions of Virtual Center and some other things that have been missing. So that blog post went out to let the community know, and we're looking forward to see if VMware will endorse it in the near future. And that's it on the developer side.
All right, well, thank you. Next sprint review is back to normal in 2 weeks. So it'll be January 24th, same time, same place. And with that, I want to thank everyone, the speakers, the contributors, the whole community for another successful sprint. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks, everyone.